So, let's talk about one of the most powerful, and let's be honest, controversial technologies of our time. We're talking about the ability to literally rewrite the code of life itself. And this isn't some far-off science fiction anymore. It is happening right now.
Irresponsible. Wow, that is a heavy word, especially when it's coming from a Nobel Prize-winning biologist. And this wasn't just some academic squabble. David Baltimore said this because of a bombshell announcement that sent shockwaves through the entire scientific community. An announcement that a line everyone agreed shouldn't be crossed had been crossed.
Because back in November of 2018, something that scientists had been warning about for years finally happened. A researcher decided he wasn't going to wait for the ethical debates to finish or for the safety to be proven. He just took a leap.
And that leap is where our story begins. It's the story of two twin girls, a huge scientific controversy, and a moment that forced the entire world to reckon with the power of this new technology.
Okay, so let's break down exactly what happened. It all centers on a Chinese scientist named He Jiahui. He used this gene editing tool, CRISPR, on human embryos. Now, his stated goal was to tweak a gene called CCR5, hoping to give the babies, who were nicknamed Lulu and Nana, a built-in resistance to HIV. And this wasn't totally random. A small number of people naturally have a mutation on this gene that does just that. But the reaction wasn't praise, it was global outrage. Why? Because the science just wasn't ready. The risk of making unintended edits elsewhere in their DNA was way too high. He crossed an ethical red line, and it ended up landing him in prison.
So this whole story just raises a massive question, right? How is any of this even possible? What on earth is this technology that lets a scientist edit the very building blocks of a human being?
To really get the debate, you've got to get the tool itself. So how does this whole revolutionary gene editing thing actually work? Let's dive in.
You know, the amazing thing is, CRISPR wasn't just invented out of thin air. Scientists actually discovered it by studying bacteria. It's part of a clever little defense system they use to fight off viruses. The easiest way to think of it is like a pair of tiny, programmable molecular scissors. The scissors part is a protein called Cas9, and you can basically tell it exactly where to go in the DNA and make a cut. It's incredibly precise.
The whole process really boils down to three main steps. First, you find the spot. A little guide molecule acts like a GPS, taking the Cas9 scissors to the exact sequence of DNA you want to edit. Second, you cut. The Cas9 scissors do their job, making a clean break. And third, you repair. This is the magic moment. The cell's own repair crew comes in to fix the break, and that's when scientists can step in to delete a gene, tweak it, or even slip in a whole new piece of code.
Okay, so now we're getting to the real heart of the matter. We get the how, the molecular scissors. But the questions that are so much harder are about the why and the when. And this is where all the ethical lines start to get really blurry really fast.
First things first, we have to understand this absolutely critical difference. On one hand, you have somatic editing. Think of it like a medical treatment for one person. You might edit their blood cells to cure a disease, but those changes stay with them, they're not passed on. Germline editing, which is what He Jiahui did, is a whole different ballgame. When you edit an embryo, that change gets copied into every single cell of that person's body, including their future reproductive cells. That means the change is heritable. It gets passed down to their children and their children's children forever. You're not just changing one person, you're changing the human gene pool.
And that brings us to the next huge distinction: therapy versus enhancement. Using CRISPR to cure a horrible genetic disease like muscular dystrophy, I mean, most people would agree that's an amazing, life-saving goal. But what about using it for enhancement? Trying to make your kid taller or smarter or have a different eye color? Well, that's when we start talking about designer babies, and all the ethical alarm bells start going off like crazy.
And this is where the debate just explodes. Because once you crack open that door to editing the human germline, you unleash this flood of massive ethical questions with consequences we just can't fully predict.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. If this technology becomes common, what kind of world do we end up with? What happens to all the people who either can't afford it or just choose not to do it?
The risks here are pretty scary to think about. You could create a whole new kind of social divide, a genetic divide. If these treatments are super expensive, only the rich could afford them, maybe creating a class of genetically enhanced people and leaving everyone else behind. We could be talking about a new biological underclass and facing discrimination based on your DNA for things like jobs or insurance.
And there's an even deeper question here. If we get the power to fix anything we decide is a genetic flaw, what does that do to us as a society?
to our acceptance of difference, of all the things that make us unique? Do we become less tolerant of, well, imperfection?
The poet Wallace Stevens wrote this beautiful line, "Flaws are our paradise." And it really gets at a deep fear here. In our search for genetic perfection, we could accidentally wipe out the very diversity that makes our species so resilient. You know, what we call a flaw today might turn out to be a huge advantage in a different world tomorrow.
And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, enhancement is just sci-fi, it'll never happen, well, some of the top scientists in the field would disagree. Fyodor Yurnov at UC Berkeley is pretty blunt about it. He says once the technology is safe enough for therapy, there's basically no way to stop people from using it for enhancement. The genie, as they say, is already out of the bottle.
The whole He Jiankui affair was a massive, global wake-up call. It proved that the science was moving way, way faster than our ethics and our laws. So how is the world even trying to play catch-up?
The reaction was fast, but people had been worried for a while. Even before the CRISPR babies were announced, scientists were calling for caution. But after November 2018, things kicked into high gear. Top scientists called for a global moratorium, basically a timeout on making genetically engineered babies. Then the World Health Organization stepped in, creating a global registry to try and get some transparency on what research is actually happening out there.
But getting the whole world to agree on one set of rules? Yeah, that's incredibly hard. What we have now is this messy patchwork of laws. More than 40 European countries and Canada have banned it outright, with serious jail time. In China, where it all happened, it's prohibited by guidelines. And here in the US, there's no actual federal law against it, but the government simply won't fund any of the research. It's complicated.
And this really sums up the whole problem, doesn't it? The science is just sprinting ahead, while our laws, our ethics, our big societal conversations, we're all just struggling to keep up. This is so much bigger than just one technology. It's forcing us to have a global conversation about the future of our species.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. The power to direct our own evolution is here. It's real. So the question isn't if we can do this anymore. The question is should we? And if we do, who gets to draw the line?